Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Gambian MPs debate a bill to end a ban on FGM. The practice has been on the rise recently despite being criminalised in 2015. Anti-FGM campaigners say its sanctioned return would be disastrous for women's rights. Also, a DR Congolese court sentences a top journalist to 6 months in prison. Stanis Bujakera was arrested last year after an article suggesting that the army had killed an opposition politician. And Congolese wordsmiths are using the French spoken word as a tool of advocacy and self-expression. The Tetris Collective expresses their deep love of Congolese and French literature with slam poetry. But first, lawmakers in the Gambia have held off from backing a bid to repeal a ban on female genital mutilation, or FGM. MPs debated the possible decriminalisation of the procedure on Monday and voted to send the bill for review. Human rights groups fear that a change to the law could put even more women and girls in danger. FGM was officially banned in the country in 2015, but the Gambia still has one of the highest rates for the practice in the world. Our regional correspondent, Sam Bradpiece, talks us through.
Female genital mutilation is a serious problem in the Gambia. More than 70% of women and girls aged 15 to 49 and more than 40% of girls aged 14 and younger have gone through the ordeal. The practice, which is extremely painful and in many cases fatal, was officially banned in 2015, although prosecutions, it must be said, are rare. Now, under pressure from religious groups, the Parliament is debating a motion to repeal the legislation which bans female genital mutilation. It's worth mentioning that nowhere in the Quran is FGM explicitly referenced or condoned. One lawmaker I spoke to said that many MPs would feel pressure from their constituents to support a lifting of the ban, although he was aware of the poor international image that this could bring to the Gambia. Human rights groups, meanwhile, say they are extremely worried by the proposed legislation, which they say would be a backward step in terms of women's rights in the Gambia.
Sam Bradpiece there for us. Now, the Pentagon says that it's working with officials in Niger in a desperate last-ditch bid to try and find a way for US troops to stay in the country. Niger's military junta issued a directive over the weekend that the troops leave following a visit from a high-level US delegation. Conversations with Nigerian officials reportedly touched on US concerns over the African country's relationships with Russia and Iran. The US military currently has a major drone base and around 1,000 personnel, including about 650 troops in Niger. And another grim abduction in northern Nigeria. At least 100 people have been taken from their homes in abductions over the weekend. Gunmen attacked communities in Kaduna State's Kajuru Council area. Our Samuel Okoye has more.
In less than 2 weeks, northern Nigeria has seen an unprecedented spate of kidnappings. The latest incident occurred Sunday with the abduction of 87 people at Aguba village. This is the fourth attack in less than 2 weeks in the area. 14 people were abducted from the nearby Dogonoma Ugwa Gamo village Saturday morning, while 61 others were abducted from Buda Hausa village on Wednesday. The most serious of the 4 incidents in the area took place in Kuriga, where gunmen abducted 278 children from 2 schools in the village. There was another abduction of school children in Sokoto State on March 9, when gunmen abducted 15 students. In Borno State, more than 200 internally displaced persons, mainly women and children, were abducted in Gamboro Ngala by the jihadist group Boko Haram. Even though President Bola Tinubu has ordered Nigeria's security agencies to rescue the abducted persons, none of them has been rescued. Those behind the abductions have also not been apprehended. Armed groups known in local parlance as bandits and jihadist groups like Boko Haram are behind the spate of abductions Nigeria has witnessed since 2014, when the jihadist group Boko Haram abducted 276 girls from government secondary school, Chibok. Nigerian security forces have in the last years failed to stop the trend.
A top journalist in DR Congo has been sentenced to 6 months in prison, accused of forgery and spreading false rumours. Stanis Bujakera was arrested last September, accused of spreading fake news about the death of opposition politician Cherubin Okende. The affair has shone a spotlight on press freedoms in the country. Emmett Livingston is in Kinshasa.
Congo, which has drawn criticism from rights groups around the world. Stanis Bujakera, a journalist who works for Jeune Afrique magazine and Reuters, has been held in prison since last September over a highly sensitive article that he says he didn't even write. On Monday evening in Kinshasa, Bujakera was sentenced to 6 months in prison and fined nearly $400, accused of spreading fake news, among other charges. The prosecution had asked for a 20-year sentence. The reporter was originally arrested after the publication of an unbylined article in Jeune Afrique magazine about the death of opposition politician Cherubin Okende. Okende was found dead in his car in central Kinshasa last year in what the Congolese authorities recently said was a suicide. But the article in Jeune Afrique, which was based on a confidential memo, alleged that Congo's intelligence agency had murdered the politician. Stanis Bujakera was blamed for fabricating this memo, but he maintained his innocence throughout the trial and said that he had nothing to do with the article. Journalists in Danger, a Congolese press rights group, said earlier on Monday that Bujakera had been subjected to a politicized trial. After the sentencing, his lawyer, Jean-Marie Kabengela, said that Bujakera was due to leave prison on Tuesday morning, having already served 6 months. But he said the judges hadn't paid attention to exculpatory evidence in favour of his client. After months in prison, Bujakera's family and friends will nonetheless breathe a sigh of relief.
Well, South Africa is gearing up for some tough elections at the end of May. The ruling ANC party has launched its manifesto, aware that it risks gaining less than 50% of votes for the first time since multiracial elections began in the country in 1994. Now, they came after the end of apartheid, which itself was triggered by a referendum that was held almost exactly 32 years ago. Clemvala looks back.
1994. Nelson Mandela becomes South Africa's first black president, and the African National Congress comes to power. It's the beginning of hope for reconciliation between communities and a chance to address inequality. During the election, the ANC published a manifesto setting out its objectives for South Africa. Among the ambitions outlined, the party aimed for a democratic society based on equality, non-racialism and non-sexism, an economy which grows through providing jobs, housing and education, and a peaceful and secure environment in which people can live without fear. After 30 years in power, what's the party's record? According to a report published by the World Bank in 2022, South Africa has one of the highest and most persistent levels of inequality in the world.
Policies such as affirmative action, black economic empowerment, affirmative procurement had a modicum of success. They also had a weakness, and that weakness was that the empowerment policies appeared to have benefited only a particular portion of society, a small coterie of people.
Another divisive issue in South Africa is land redistribution. Under President Jacob Zuma, the government launched an agrarian reform aimed at redistributing a portion of arable land to black farmers and the descendants of those dispossessed of their land under the colonial and apartheid regimes. But according to experts, this promise has not been kept. South Africa's economy is also in trouble.
You have a private sector which is not terribly well regulated. It's regulated in a way in which it makes it difficult to do business on the one hand. On the other hand, progressive as some of this regulatory infrastructure is, it is very hard to police. And because it is not being policed, people are taking the gap and using the opportunity to exploit the holes in the system.
The unemployment rate in the Rainbow Nation is over 30%, the highest in the world. Another major problem is corruption. The ANC has been plagued by corruption scandals over the years. Jacob Zuma led South Africa from 2009 to 2018 and has been accused of overseeing a period of endemic corruption crystallized by the Gupta affair. For the first time since 1994, the ANC leadership is being challenged and may fall below 50%, forcing the party to form a coalition to stay in government.
Well, Congolese wordsmiths are using the French spoken word as a tool of advocacy and creative self-expression. The Tetras Collective is a trio with a deep love of Congolese and French literature, using slam poetry to explore their passion for wordplay. Our team sent us this report.
In the streets of Congo's capital, Kinshasa, Lingala, one of the country's 4 national languages, is spoken everywhere.
I'm Congolese, I speak Lingala. What comes out of my mouth can only be Lingala.
French is still seen as the language of bureaucracy and state institutions, but some creatives are reclaiming the language for expression of less procedural aspects of their lives and are exploring its poetic lyricism. Wordsmiths have come together in the neighborhood of Limete for a slam poetry workshop.
Comme lors du baptême du Christ, celui-ci est mon poète bien-aimé en qui j'ai mis toute l'addiction, l'incarnation de Orphée ou de Césaire, et je lui dis Elia, Elia, l'Eloslam et Botami, Elia, Elia, l'Eloslam et Botami.
It's run by a collective called Tetra, who play with the spoken word, creatively reshaping the vocabulary, rhythm, and delivery of French.
I sing in French, but maybe that doesn't encourage me to speak French. But when I listen to slam in French, it's oral poetry. So when someone speaks in French, I have this need to understand what the person's saying. And the little French that I once knew may come back.
The performances are often political or draw on social realities, tackling concerns about governance or conflict in the country's east. The trio also draw on their love of literature, sprinkling their lyrics with references to their favourite local authors, like Zamenga, Batukezanga, or French writers like Jean de La Fontaine.
It's really interesting to take those references and put them in the texts and develop them. We're not saying they're always right, but we can challenge them and find something even more interesting.
The performance extends to their clothes. Tetra often dress as clerics, as a metaphorical demonstration of their devotion to the world of letters, by delivering their powerful verses before those congregated. Audiences, transported by Tetra's eloquence, have increasingly become dedicated devotees.
Je vous salue, Slam, petit frère de la poésie. Tétra est avec vous, vous êtes béni entre tous les arts. Et le fruit de vos entrailles sont Benjamin Massia, Fernando Kusenje, Obed Bossa. Sainte poésie, mère des émotions.
Wow. Powerful stuff. Good for you, Tetras. That, though, is all we have time for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, though. Do so again if you can. Till then, take care.
On France24.com. Click Live. Find the stories you want to watch or to read about. Live news 24 hours a day in 4 languages. Explore the topics that captivate you. Are you looking for the latest news or to watch a show on demand? Follow us. Live international news is just a click away. Liberté, égalité, actualité.